more parallels between me and Will than I thought. We were born in exactly the same year. We kind of started around the same time in terms of being published as well, didn't we? I suppose. I was in the late '80s. You were the early '90s.
Yeah.
And as is the way of these things, we've had the same publisher on and off for about 20 years. We met at the publishers' sales conferences and that kind of thing. But I think we've both of us just fallen out with every other writer in Britain, so we're all we've got left now, which is kind of clinging on to each other. I don't talk to any other writers, so we haven't reached breaking point yet. Might come tonight, actually. Yeah, it might come tonight.
Yes. No, my mother, I think, worked for your first publisher. Yeah. And I read Jonathan's first novel when it was published.
Okay, that novel sold 272 copies, so you were one of them.
I got
Your
it.
mother, you got it
for free. And I was quite, envious of this young talent who was out there. So I've always known about Jonathan since he started publishing. I don't know. It's funny. The picture he paints of English or British writers, it's not strictly true. You haven't fallen out with all of them, have you? You're just comically exaggerating. But there is, it's a very fissiparous world. It's a very divided world, I think. This afternoon, Bogdan took us to see the Writers' Union building here. Okay. Fantastic stoves.
I knew you were going to talk about the stoves.
Oh,
This man practically came over the stove.
Well, one of them was white. You wouldn't have noticed. Very beautiful stoves. Enough to arouse even a cold-blooded Englishman like myself. But I asked about the Writers' Union, and obviously it's a creature of the communist era and of the idea that literary production can be viewed collectively. And what you get in societies like Britain is what has come to you with a dreadful crash, is a society in which there can be no union of writers. Every writer conceives of him or herself as a little independent capitalist on their own with a little factory or a little word mine. And we're all set against each other, and there is a terrible sense that if he's getting sales, I'm not getting sales. If he's being promoted, I'm not being promoted. If she's in the newspaper, I'm not in the newspaper. And that creates a very, very kind of divisive world. And I think you see it actually, and it hasn't been the same in other societies and other cultures. For example, in England, you have very little sense of literary movements or of people being sympathetic broadly to each other's literary project. There's no acceptance of a diversity of diversity of approaches, but a commonality of intent. It is all reduced to sales and money in rather a savage calculus. And that means that even with quite good friends who you feel close to, there's a terrible sense of competition and envy. And maybe the Writers' Union looks ridiculous and fusty, and maybe it was stacked with ghastly old Soviet bureaucrats of one kind or another, and maybe it was ridiculous. But surely there is some potential for writers not to just feel this awful monetary sense of competition with one another. And the stoves are absolutely great. I mean, they're beautiful and tall, and any writer who had a stove like that in his writing room would feel a lot warmer and happier. So, if the Romanian government feels minded to give me a stove, I would accept it in a way that I would never accept an honour from my own government.
I don't really know how to say this without coming over all kind of sentimental and over serious, but actually I've felt increasingly close to Will over the last few years, and partly that's to do with the fact that our family circumstances are similar. We have kids of almost exactly the same age. We are exactly the same age ourselves. We get together and moan about the aging process and the changes that come over you when you enter middle age and all that kind of thing. But the other thing is that, you know, he's been writing for 20 years, and I don't always understand, I don't always like everything that he does, but he's not a career novelist, and there are a lot of those in Britain and in every other country as well. And B.S. Johnson, who I keep coming back to, was often described as an experimental writer, and he hated this word and said that, you know, the division between experimental writing and other kinds of writing wasn't important. There was only one important kind of writer, and these were writers who, I'll try and remember the quote exactly, were writing as though it mattered, as though they meant it to matter. And that's true of Will, and it's not true of all that many other British writers. So, for that reason.
I can, without, you know, filling up here with tears, I can only endorse the sentiment completely. And we may not have to, we probably shouldn't spend too much time with each other, because a horrible synchrony will start to appear between our works. And we wouldn't want that, because then we'd lose sales.